In today's video, we review Cloudspire by Chip Theory Games. Overall, this game has just absolutely, I have a kind of a layout. It does have a very large footprint, but the components for this game are absolutely fantastic. If you were to ever play this game out at a venue or something, I guarantee you everybody is going to stop by and be like, what is going on here? What is this? The main board is made of these neoprene mats. Again, they add for just insane durability, but they have this kind of non-stick rubber kind of backing, so they don't really move around as you do with some of the other, multi-pieced, base or dungeon or mansion or whatever it is. They don't move around as much as you're playing, even when the table gets bumped. That is a huge advantage. Like I said, it is a fairly large game. You do need a large surface. I would say you'd probably need at least a 3 foot by 3 foot surface to play. Here on my playing table, I have basically a 2 foot by 3 foot, and it definitely fits long ways. But depending on where, if you were to play the PvP mode, depending on where you would put your bases, might get a little difficult. So you definitely need that full 3 foot by 3 foot. Speaking of the components, there are just a few major components within the game. Once again, you have the bases or the terrain, which are these large neoprene mats, but you can terraform those throughout the game, which are smaller mats. So you would buy this in the shop and then possibly terraform this area to change its layout. And once again, these are also neoprene mats. These don't have the classic Chip Theory game stitch on them. I kind of wish they would. I wish they would have made these maybe a hair smaller to account for that extra, size. Again, to add that durability to the mats. But that is a small price to pay for the overall, because these will definitely, no matter what you do to them, be more durable and better quality than, say, a cardboard mat of the same type. Then you have tons of chips in the game. But not only chips, they have given you these little cases to put your chips in. This is a great addition. It really helps you to bring your game out to the table a whole lot faster. I just kind of wish they were just a hair larger. If you notice in mine, we will have, the different factions here, and I have my row of purple. Well, they fit pretty much. It's just not big enough to put that last purple in there. Yeah, see, it's just, you can see there's room there, so I wish it was just a hair bigger to be able to fit the entire base line in there. Hopefully it's not going to be an issue, because I am hoping that one of the upgrades that they do will be for more heroes and more minions of these factions. Not just additional factions, which if they were to have do that, that overall size doesn't matter as much anymore. But from a base game perspective, it is just that hair too short. The overall game is a MOBA, which is a multiplayer online battle arena. That's what it was kind of based off of. With it having a high influence in tower defense. But one of the unique things about this for me is they've also included exploration. So as you're going through the map, you are also exploring the different areas, collecting resources and relics. that is a pretty awesome thing. Players will control up to 4 factions out of the base game, or one of 4 factions from the base game. We will get into some of the expansions later, but this review is basically just on all the base game components. There is a 5th expansion you can get that just adds to the replayability, but here in the base you have those 4. The goal of the game is to recruit, deploy your armies, your minions, your heroes, march down the field, and build towers to protect your fort, and destroy your enemy, get to their base, so forth and so on. It's a lot of fun. This is a very unique, very ambitious game to try to put this kind of game into a tabletop form, and I do believe they did that very, very well. The price point is fairly high. I believe it's in the $110 range for the base game alone, but this is one of those games that you are definitely getting what you paid for. All of those components, as we talked about earlier, are absolutely fantastic. The storage components that they give you for the little extra terrain, for the large terrain, for the bases, they are absolutely great. Good plastic containers. They're really going to help you protect your gaming components. They did make these a little larger than they needed to be, so as you get expansions, you can just put them straight into the base. So there is that room for upgrade. One of the things, this game is one of those double-edged swords when it comes to the rules. The basic mechanics and the basic rules are very straightforward. You can go through this rule book one time and be like, oh, I got this. This is no problem. But then as you dive deeper into the game, it just gets more and more complicated, but in a good way, because each faction is very different. Each faction has their own set of abilities, special abilities, things they can do. They get played slightly different, where some are stronger, some are faster, some build and spend the source, which is kind of like your currency in the game, differently. And that's one of those double-edged swords, because off the rip you're like, oh, this is a very simple game. But then once you get into all of that massive complexity that each faction has, the level of gaming and strategy in the game just goes up. Why that could also be almost one of the negatives is because I could see you not being familiar with one of the factions, and all of a sudden they do something or they have some ability, and you'd have been like, oh, well, I would have played this differently if I would have known you could do that. So there is that one drawback to having each group so differently and having so much complexity in here. Speaking of the rules and everything, the rule book in general is extremely well written. There are sections in there that talk about all the different abilities and the pages that they go to, and how it's laid out, and you'll, like I said, you'll read through it and you're like, oh, this I got this, no, absolutely no problem. The rule book is absolutely fantastic. I love the rule book for this game. One of the other great advantages or good pros for the game is its replayability. Here I set up a simulated PvP style, and you put your main base, your main terrain in the center, and then you put the other terrain out randomly around. So just that layout could be different. However, the game also provides in the base one additional terrain. And you're thinking, oh, one terrain, what does that do? Well, since you randomly put these out there, that drastically changes the way that the layout can be, because you might not get this one in this play. You might the different terrains, not only in their location, but which terrains you get. And the more you add on, for like say Portal Seeker expansion, which gives you more terrain, the more of that you add, the more change and replayability it adds. But even in the base, you have tons of replayability because you have the 4 factions. So, you know, you're always changing, you know, which one you are, the way that the game is laid out, and with your upgrades, it would be almost impossible to upgrade everything for your faction of choice, for your game. So not only can you pick different factions to be with different games, but you can try different upgrades. You can try different strategies for even the one that you have chosen, the one that you like the most, and just replay. That is really awesome. Additionally, with its replayability is the different game modes. Just from the base game, you have your PvP or player versus player style. Then it comes with solo campaigns and co-op campaigns. Within the solo, there are 4 scenarios for each of the groups. That is insane. That is the main content. But then in co-op, there's an additional 2, I believe, for each one of them. And because, as you know, with solo, anything true co-op can technically be played solo, just the one person playing both sides of that co-op faction, which means those additional co-op scenarios also go in towards your solo ones. Even more replay. Just insane. I absolutely love it. The game itself is very thematic. Especially within those scenarios, they have a great deal of lore that goes in here. All of the, you know, the different factions are very unique and they play very different, and where you can go and do different things. It is truly awesome. And is a very thematic experience as you're playing through and setting everything up. This was a Kickstarter release. It started off as Kickstarter. Of course, you know, once they get it all shipped out and into market, they will be offering it for sale on their site. But one of the problems we have with Kickstarter games, especially big box Kickstarter games like this, is what I'm going to call the Kickstarter fatigue. And that's where the base game seems a little light, where you don't have everything you need in there to have a full game experience or to have full replay experience. And you almost have to get those Kickstarter exclusives, or you have to get those Kickstarter extra expansions that come with that. That's not the case with this game. This game, the more you get, the more expansions you get, the more replay and the more fun you'll have. But just with the base game alone, you're set. You're good to go. Now, with all of these components, one of the things you have to keep in mind is you will be able to throw away your weight bench. This thing is heavy. And with the way they've designed the box, it supports the game. It's a very thick, sturdy box. And the room in here is big enough to add in extras and extra expansions. So it's just going to get heavier and heavier as you go, especially if you replace the standard health chips that come with the base game with the premium health chips. Again, it just adds more to the weight, to the actual heaviness of the game. But you know, it's one of those ones where if that's your con for the game, it's heavy. I think we're doing pretty good when it comes to components and what's in here. One of the slight downsides to the game, one of the other cons, is within your first few plays of the game, because it is deceptively complex, where you go through that very well written rule book and you read it and you're like, oh, I got this. This is so awesome, so good. And you get to start playing. You will spend probably 50% of your time going back to the rule book, checking scenarios, checking, oh, well, wait a minute. This has kind of come up. Do I do this or do I do that? You know, how did that one faction specific thing, how did that go about? Oh, I don't remember. And you'll go you'll go into that. One of the other slight negatives that I have found in here is that damage is dealt slightly different depending on what kind of unit you're talking about. If you're talking about your heroes and minions, then it is a very straightforward damage is on the chip. You know exactly what it is. But if you're talking about the towers or the spires in the game, it is based on a die roll from with the die count that you're getting from the chip. So you're not using the damage. So you could very easily get confused that, hey, it's just this straight damage. I forget that I'm actually needing to roll these die to get that damage amount. And so because there is that slight difference in the way that some of the characters do that, you might end up going about halfway through the game. You might be going through a little bit of the game and all of a sudden, oops, we've been doing this part wrong. And need to either start doing it right from there on or try to correct it or what have you. Additionally, you have some of the other features in the game that are slightly different. Excuse me. Where most stats are just straight up as they should be, but then you have some things where, like range, you'll get a +1. So again, it's one of those things that if you forget that, starting to play, you could then come back and be like, oh, whoops, we've been forgetting to add some of those things. There are times in the rules where you will say be charging down, and your minions are supposed to take the shortest route of resistance to get into the base, and you're thinking you're going you're going the right way, and then all of a sudden it gets blocked by your opponent's forces, and you're like, well, I don't want to go that way anymore. I want to go this slightly longer route now because this is being blocked, and I don't want to force a battle. How do you do it? Which way do you go? I'm thinking because of the style of game and it's what it is. You still got to go that shorter route, but it is one of those things that you got to stop and think about and go on. My background is I started life as a programmer, and in one of the talks, in one of the descriptions I heard somebody talking about this game was they brought up the fact that it is very programmatic, and that always really stuck with me because what you're doing is as you are playing, you are buying your minions, buying your heroes, and you are then setting them up, preparing them to go on because they move slightly different. Where the minions move on their own, the heroes you move the way you want them to, and so you kind of set up your situation, and your opponent sets up his, and then you kind of go at it. And you kind of you're programming your style of play for whatever you want it to be, and then you let it go and you kind of set it up. And I've always then kind of caught on to that and absolutely loved that idea. So that aspect of the game I've also really enjoyed, where during the setup that you do. You are setting up how you're planning on playing it, and then letting your people, you know, just charge down the field and get going. As far as expansions go, they do offer quite a bit. Of course, like I said, this was a Kickstarter game. One of the things that I did not get, that I kind of kicked myself for not doing now, is I didn't get the player mat. And all that is a large neoprene mat with edge stitching that you would then place your smaller terrain mats on top of. One of the good things about that is it does give you a sense of scale and size of the game. But I do kind of wish I would have gone back and gotten that. One of the things I talked about earlier was the health chips and how they offer premium health chips. So that is another one of the upgrades. I, of course, did get the premium ones. These are, of course, the basic ones with the base game. I do like the premium chips. I'm hoping one day they wind up, because a lot of their ones, especially if they just have a very low dice count, they come up with premium dice. I'm hoping they do come up with premium dice. That I will definitely love and look into getting. But as of right now, all they have is the premium chips. Did get those. I like those because they add a consistent weight and feel as you're moving things along. You definitely can tell the difference and feel the difference between these standard chips and the premium ones, especially once you have them, you know, under your guys and you're moving them around. You definitely can feel the difference. The next expansion that they offer is a Spire miniatures line, and that is a true aesthetic. Just like the premium chips, it's just an aesthetic add-on for your towers. So that way, when you actually have this giant tower that's sitting there, that looks just absolutely fantastic and has great board presence. Again, anything that adds theme to the game, presence to the game, realistic value to the game, I am all in on. So I really do like those towers. The final simply aesthetic upgrade that they have within this first Kickstarter, first phase of it, is their scenario book. It is a hardbound book that basically is nothing more than the scenario books that came in the base game for the solo and co-op, but in a very nice, well done hardbound copy and extra lore in that. Again, that was one of the items that I got. Again, adding more lore, adding more thematic value to the game, I am always in on. And then, of course, it is a whole lot sturdier, being that it is hardbound. Now on to the content additions, content expansions that they did within the first Kickstarter wave, and there are 2 of those. They added a faction expansion, the Greed, and they added a content expansion, Portal Seekers. The Greed adds a 5th expansion with their, you know, minions and heroes and so forth and so on, everything you need to play that expansion, while the Portal Seeker added additional terrain tiles, terraforming tiles, points of interest, units, relic card, you know, those kind of things. It added some of those. Both of those are extremely useful for replayability, adds tons to the game. But again, with what you have here in the base, they are not required, but highly recommended. Some of the things that I am hoping that they add, some of the stuff that I'm hoping they do to this game going forward is I want, in kind of an order of, for me personally, importance, I want to see more expansions like the Portal Seekers, more content expansions. For me, 5 factions is a ton. That adds a ton of replayability. Maybe a 6th. I could see maybe you wanting, but you really don't need too many more factions. But adding more terrain, adding more of that kind of stuff is, for me, would be absolutely huge. Speaking of the factions, my next upgrade that I'm hoping that they do is more minions and heroes for the 5 factions they have. I would much prefer a hero minion set come out than a 6th faction set come out. Just, it will give you more options to build for each of your factions, more choices, all of that kind of stuff. Finally, you do have some skills in here. You do have some things you can upgrade your heroes to. And in this game, it is not as noticeable as, say, their Hufflemunkus game, but I would love to see them be able to add side printing to the chips, where written on the side they have, you know, what that chip is or what that upgrade is doing for you. So that way, when you have, you know, all of your things, you know, stacked up, so forth and so on, and you're just looking at it, you know, with your hero here and just making stuff up here, you know, your hero, and you have your health, and just have your stuff. You could just look at that on the side, and you can see what, you know, what that you know, especially again if you're talking about a skill upgrade, you know, what you have done to that guy without actually having to, you know, look and see what you've done. To me, that would be absolutely fantastic. As far as additional aesthetics go, like I talked about earlier, I would love to see some premium dice come out, especially when we're talking about so few dice in the game. That would be an awesome upgrade. My final thoughts on the game are, this is a definite 100% go out, get it now if you can. If you see it available, buy this game. You know, once it goes retail, highly recommend it. It is so much fun. This will easily, you know, rank up in your top 10, top 5 list of games, just because of the complexity that it has, the amount of components. I mean, look, I mean, here we have the source components. So as you're playing and as you're doing upgrades, or your little upgrade chips here, as you're doing upgrades, you're sticking them here in your tile, and just even for that, they give you this really nice case to put those in. Most other companies, this would just be a little baggie, but here they actually gave you this really nice little case for you to put all your stuff in and kind of go. You know, all of your stuff in here has nice you know, packaging to hold everything in. Within the board, you know, they're made so as you're doing things, you're slotting your dice in, so you know, you're knowing what things are what and what things are doing. All of that is really great. They same thing for your health and, you know, source life. You know, you know what they have done to make that you know, tracking is just fantastic. It's easy to use, easy to manipulate, and it works really well, especially with their, let's see. Here we go. Move you a little bit. There we go. Maybe you can actually see what I'm talking about. You know, so that way you can manipulate your stuff, really track your health and your source and your health very well. You know, they you know, it's a really nice system. You know, it fits their style of play, you know, with these premium chips and what have you. Let's see. One of the things that you know, when I started with gaming, was mainly with, you know, some PC games. And one of my absolute favorite PC game was that Civilization build. And, you know, it is kind of hard to translate that into a board game. And while this isn't a Civ game, it does have a lot of those aspects in it. I'm hoping they take this, either this or maybe their next game, to that next level and actually build off of this and build that true Civilization game. That would be absolutely fantastic, because I can see the potential from this to that. Absolutely, you know, again, we have, you know, we're going, you know, even down to their cards that are actually not cardboard, but are PVC. Everything in here is top notch. Everything has been thought out for, you know, even down to the storage in the box. Highly recommended. Great fun, great gameplay. Lots of different ways to play the game. Lots of thematic value. You know, everything from player versus player to solo to co-op. And it was all built in from the ground up, not afterthoughts. So it all flows and works very well. Well, that's my review for Cloudspire. I hope it helped you to determine if this is something you would be interested in, and you know, to help you decide on whether or not it is something you would want to get. And I will see you guys next time.